Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Bruns, the Regional Communications Manager for Idaho Fish and Game in the Clearwater Region. Thanks for joining us tonight for our upcoming 2022-2024 fishing season scoping meeting. Now I'm going to let our regional fisheries staff introduce themselves. We'll start with Joe DuPont.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe DuPont. I'm the Clearwater Region's Fisheries Manager. If you're wondering what a Clearwater Fisheries Manager does, underneath me I have 4 different programs. I have the Resident Fish Program, the Anadromous Harvest Monitoring Program, the Fisheries Habitat Program, and the Fishing Boating Angler Access Program. And so next you'll hear from the biologists who are actually in charge of these different programs.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert Hand. I'm one of the regional fisheries biologists. I primarily work on our resident fisheries program, which includes our lowland lakes and reservoirs and our trout streams. I also do a little bit of work with anadromous fish, primarily working on Chinook salmon spawning surveys in September. Thanks a lot.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Wilson. I'm a fisheries research biologist, and I work on Dorsack Reservoir with the Nutrient Restoration Program and also kokanee and bass populations in the reservoir.
Hi, everyone. I'm Don Whitney. I'm the harvest monitoring biologist for anadromous fisheries in the Clearwater region. Taking care of salmon and steelhead harvest and the snake, salmon, and Clearwater River drainages.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Reiner, and I'm a fishery habitat biologist in the region. And my primary focus is to identify and implement habitat projects to benefit steelhead in the Clearwater region, and more specifically in the Potlatch River Basin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marika Dobos. I'm an anadromous staff biologist out of the Clearwater region. We have a pretty extended group of fisheries folks in the Clearwater. So I oversee 3 biologists involved with the wild salmon and steelhead program. Those biologists are Brian Knoth, Scott Putnam, and Nolan Smith. So we primarily work on monitoring and research work involved with wild salmon and steelhead. So the biologists are mainly operating traps and other infrastructures to monitor wild steelhead and salmon abundances for various different projects. So thank you. Jen, you're up next.
All right, thanks everyone for those introductions. And even though you can see we have a really involved team of dedicated fisheries biologists, we still do need your input, feedback, and suggestions to help manage our fishery in the Clearwater region. So that's what this meeting tonight is all about. So anytime during this meeting, if you have a question or comment, you may type it into that form located right below this video screen, and those comments will come to us. And we'll try to answer as many of those questions as we can tonight. So we'll kick off the meeting tonight with a presentation given by Joe DuPont regarding the 2022-2024 fishing seasons. And we'll follow up the presentation with a question and answer period. So remember, you have until April 11th to submit your comments or feedback. After this initial feedback process, your suggestions will be used to develop formal proposals. And those proposals will be considered and presented to the Fish and Game Commission at their meeting in Coeur d'Alene on May 5th and 6th. So now we'll go ahead and begin that presentation by Regional Fisheries Manager Joe DuPont.
Hi everybody, my name is Joe DuPont. I'm the Clearwater Region's Fisheries Manager. And I want to thank all of you for taking this opportunity to comment on the types of fishing seasons and limits you would like to see for the 2022 through 2024 seasons and rule cycle. Now, if you have not already done so, I encourage you to listen to the presentation on the fishery season setting process. This video is also on this Clearwater Region webpage, and it describes the process that the Idaho Department of Fish and Game uses when setting seasons and limits. This video will help you understand how the comments you provide today will ultimately be used to set seasons and limits for the next 3 years. If you're listening to this presentation, that likely means you want to provide comments on fisheries or water bodies that occur in the Clearwater region. Just so everybody is aware of which water bodies occur in the Clearwater region, I wanted to share some maps with you. This map here shows the entire Clearwater region. To give you a better feel for which water bodies occur in the Clearwater region, I'm going to follow up with a series of maps starting in the northwest corner, so this area here, and then I'm going to progress in a clockwise manner around the region. So if we start in the northwest corner of the Clearwater region, you will find it includes all tributaries of the Palouse River drainage. Moving east from the Palouse River drainage, you will find the Clearwater River drainage, which encompasses the vast majority of the Clearwater region. It includes the Potlatch River drainage, the North Fork Clearwater River drainage, the Lochsa, the Selway, as well as the South Fork Clearwater River drainage. If you move south from the Clearwater Basin, the Clearwater region also contains all watersheds in the Salmon River from its mouth upstream to Riggins. So this is the mouth of the Salmon River, and it includes all watersheds up to Riggins. And then upstream of Riggins, it includes the Salmon River and all its tributaries draining in from the north until you pass the Horse Creek watershed. So all these watersheds here. Finally, the Clearwater region includes the Idaho side of the Snake River and its tributaries from the Idaho-Washington border upstream to Hells Canyon Dam. Now, one thing I want you to be aware of while you're thinking about which seasons and limits you want to comment on is we are currently using a citizen-based working group to develop seasons and limit proposals for steelhead and fall Chinook salmon in the Clearwater. We are using this process because opening a fall Chinook salmon fishery in the Clearwater River at the same time as the catch and release steelhead fishery occurs is highly controversial. So instead of having the Idaho Department of Fish and Game develop seasons and limit proposals for these fisheries, the people who are influenced the most by these seasons will be the ones responsible for developing the proposals. This citizen-based working group is called the Clearwater River Fisheries Working Group, and these are the members of this group. They represent different angler types, such as fly anglers and bait anglers, as well as guides and businesses. Because this working group is responsible for developing seasons and limit proposals for steelhead and fall Chinook in the Clearwater River drainage, we will not be seeking comments on these fisheries during this portion of the season and limit setting process. In addition to steelhead and fall Chinook salmon in the Clearwater Basin, we will also not be asking for comments on our spring and summer Chinook salmon fisheries. Their returns have been too unpredictable to set seasons and limits 3 years at a time, and as such, we have a different season setting process for them. So in summary, in this scoping process we are currently going through, we would like to hear your comments about any of the fisheries that occur in the Clearwater region except for the spring and summer Chinook salmon fisheries and the steelhead and fall Chinook salmon fisheries that occur in the Clearwater River drainage. Now, before we go on, I just want to make sure everybody knows how to provide comments on seasons and limits for fisheries in the Clearwater region through the Idaho Department of Fish and Game website. Seeing you are all attending this virtual meeting, it tells me that you have figured out how to navigate to this particular web page here. You can provide comments on fisheries in any of the regions in Idaho, but in this case, to comment on fisheries in the Clearwater region, you would go down and click on the Clearwater Region tab. So this particular tab right here. Once you do this, it will take you to the Clearwater Region's public input page, which is shown right here. This web page houses videos you can watch that provides background on certain topics we are interested in receiving comments on, as well as several ways you can provide comments on various fisheries. For example, if you scroll down on this web page, you will see what is shown here. The top portion shows a list of videos you can watch. So this here is the list of videos. In addition, if you look below this list of videos, you will see a box with a green header that says, provide your opinions on the Clearwater hot topics. So this area right here. This is a list of fisheries we would like you to comment on. If any of these fisheries are of interest to you, you can click on it and it will take you to a questionnaire where you can respond to questions provided. If you want to provide comments on fisheries other than those listed here, you can scroll down farther. And you will see this section asking for you to submit your ideas on other fisheries. At this location, you can type the water body you want to comment on, so you would type the water body name in here. You can also select from a drop-down list of species that you want to comment on, and you can also select from a drop-down list of the type of seasons or limit changes you would like to see. In addition, you're always free to just enter any comment you may have in this section here. So after you've done this, you will need to scroll down further where you can enter your contact information and then hit submit. You will need to do this each time you want to provide comments on a different fishery. However, don't worry, this contact information will auto-populate for you so you don't have to keep re-entering it every time. Okay, now that you know how to provide comments, we would like to provide some background information on fisheries or issues that we've been hearing comments on from the public. One of the things we have been hearing a lot in the past few years is that the steelhead season in the Snake River can be confusing because at times the different states can have different seasons and limits. Because we have been hearing these comments a lot, we want to provide some background to all of you on this topic, and we want to get a better understanding on what the broader public thinks about this issue. When referring to the Snake River, in this case I'm talking about the 110 miles of the Snake River from the Idaho-Washington border at Lewiston upstream to Hell's Canyon Dam, which is shown in red. The entire eastern side of this section of the Snake River occurs in Idaho, so this portion here. Whereas the western side of the Snake River from the Idaho-Washington border upstream to this white line, this section here, occurs in Washington. And then from this white line all the way up to Hell's Canyon Dam on the western side occurs in Oregon. What this means is if you are fishing in this section of river here, you can fish with the Idaho or Washington license. And if you're fishing in this section here, you can fish with an Oregon or Idaho license. And depending on which license you have dictates which seasons and limits you must follow. This table shows how the steelhead seasons and limits differ between each state for each month of the year. The reason this table starts with July and runs through June is because the first steelhead for a particular run year arrive in Idaho in July, and then most steelhead make it to Idaho by December, but a few will continue to arrive all the way up until June. So if you look at this table, you can see that the steelhead season in the Snake River for Idaho is closed in July. It then opens to catch and release in August. And on September 1, it opens to harvest with a 3-fish daily bag limit. This season stays open through April and then closes for May and June. Now for Washington, it has a 2-fish daily limit starting in July. And then it changes to a 3-fish limit in August, and this season remains through March, and then closes for the month of April and May before it reopens in June to a 2-fish limit. The seasons and limits in Oregon are about the same as Idaho's, except instead of having a catch and release season in August, the fishery is closed for them. So as you look at this table, it should become obvious that the area of concern is really the months of July and August, as this is when the steelhead seasons and limits can be very different for each state. Once you get to September, the seasons are really the same until April, and by April, the vast majority of steelhead have left Washington waters, making these differences not as significant. That is all the background information we have for you on the Snake River steelhead fishery. We have developed 4 questions on the steelhead fishery that we hope you will take the time to answer. By doing so, it will help ensure we develop proposals that capture what is important to anglers. You can find the questionnaire specific to this steelhead fishery on the Clearwater Region webpage. Another fishery we want to bring to your attention and hope that you will provide comments on is the fall Chinook salmon fishery that occurs in the Snake and Salmon rivers. It has been providing a fall Chinook salmon fishery annually since 2008 that certain groups of anglers really enjoy. The Idaho Department of Fish and Game Commission has set seasons and limits annually every year since 2008 to account for changes in run size, changes where we release smolts, and changes in our sport fishing permit that specifies the amount of impact we can have in wild fish. We have now got to the point where returns of adult fall Chinook salmon have been relatively consistent, and we don't foresee changes in the near future to where we release smolts or to our permit requirements. As such, it is now our intentions to add the seasons and limits for fall Chinook salmon into our 3-year seasons and rules cycle, which will run from 2022 through 2024. By doing this, we would create seasons and limits anglers could become familiar with and easily to refer to. It would prevent us from having to reprint new brochures each year, and it would reduce the time and effort needed to convene the commission to set seasons and limits each year. It should be noted that if there are years when fall Chinook salmon returns are smaller than expected, the director can easily reduce limits or close the fishery through an emergency order. Now, before asking for your input on how you would like to see seasons and limits structured for fall Chinook salmon in the Snake and Salmon rivers for the next 3 years, we would like to provide you some background information that would allow you to make a more informed decision. The red river segments on this map shows areas in the Snake and Salmon rivers where we have provided fall Chinook salmon fisheries in the past 2 years. This is about 108 miles of the Snake River and 66 miles of the Salmon River. We provided fisheries in these locations to take advantage of returning hatchery fish. The blue circles on this map show where fall Chinook smolts have been released since 2018. All total, the goal is to release about 2.8 million smolts across these locations. Recently, we have seen hatchery fall Chinook salmon return as far upstream as Riggins in the Salmon River. So that would be this reach of river right here. This suggests that we could open another 21 miles of river to fall Chinook salmon fishing, which would provide 87 total miles of fishing opportunity in the Salmon River and a total of about 200 miles when you combine the Snake and Salmon rivers together. This figure shows the number of natural or wild fall Chinook salmon that have passed over Lower Granite Dam since 2008, which was the first year we started providing a fishery for fall Chinook salmon in Idaho. Typically, the wild fish make up about 1/3 of the entire run, and as you can see in this figure, the wild return increased steadily from 2008, where about 1,700 fish passed over Lower Granite Dam, to where almost 19,000 fish passed over Lower Granite Dam in 2013. Since 2010, wild returns have exceeded 5,000 fish in all years except in 2018. One of the reasons I wanted to share this figure with you is because what really controls how many fall Chinook salmon we can harvest in Idaho is the number of wild fish that make it past Lower Granite Dam. NOAA Fisheries, the federal agency that manages fish listed under the Endangered Species Act, evaluated what percent of the wild fall Chinook run could be harvested without jeopardizing their recovery. And they developed a sliding scale where the larger the return is, the more impact we could have on wild fish. The dotted white line shows how many wild adult fall Chinook salmon have to pass over Lower Granite Dam to reach our highest allowable impact rate. What this means is if the adult wild return is over about 5,000 fish, then the states can harvest 10% or more of the wild return. As I mentioned earlier, since 2010, over 5,000 wild fish have passed over Lower Granite Dam every year except for one, meaning we could have been able to manage our fisheries at the maximum level in all these years except for in 2018. I also want to point out that last year we provided a fishery that allowed a daily limit of 3 adult fish, but only one could have had an adipose fin. Depending on where you fish, on average about 30 to 50% of the fish with an adipose fin are wild fish. At the conclusion of the 2020 season, what we found was we were well short of our allowable harvest for both hatchery and wild fish. In fact, if all the fish that anglers reported releasing were actually harvested, we would still have been short of reaching our allowable harvest for both wild and hatchery fish. That is all the background information we have for you on the Snake and Salmon River fall Chinook salmon fisheries. We have developed 3 questions on this fall Chinook salmon fishery that we hope you will take the time to answer to help ensure we develop proposals that capture what is important to anglers. You can find the questionnaire specific to this fall Chinook salmon fishery on the Clearwater Region webpage. Okay, let's talk about Coho salmon for a while. In 3 of the last 4 years, Idaho has been able to provide coho salmon fishing opportunities in the Clearwater River, which has added some diversity that appeals to many anglers who fish this water body. In the past, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game has set seasons and limits annually for coho salmon due to the uncertainty whether enough fish would return to provide a fishery. Because these fisheries are becoming more consistent, it is our intention to add the seasons and limits for coho salmon into our 3-year seasons and rules cycle, which will run from 2022 through 2024. By doing this, we would create seasons and limits anglers could become familiar with and easily refer to. It would prevent us from having to reprint new brochures each year, and it would reduce the time and effort needed to convene the commission to set seasons each year. It should be noted that if there are years when coho salmon returns are too small to provide fishing opportunities, the director can easily close the fishery through an emergency order. Now, before asking for your input on how you would like to see seasons and limits structured for coho salmon in the Clearwater River, we would like to provide you some background information that will allow you to make a more informed decision. Past coho salmon fisheries have occurred in locations in the Clearwater River Basin to take advantage of returning hatchery fish. The Nez Perce tribe's goal is to release about 1 million smolts at the locations depicted by the red circles on the map. The stream segments in purple show where we have provided fishing opportunities in the past for coho salmon and include the entire Clearwater River, the North Fork Clearwater River to Dvorak Dam, and the Middle Fork Clearwater River upstream to Clear Creek. When combined, these river reaches total 78 miles of river. Some coho salmon have been found to stray up the South Fork Clearwater River, likely due to its close proximity to Kuski Hatchery. If South Fork Clearwater River was open, it would add another 62 miles of river to this fishery, bringing the total to 141 miles. To give you a feel for how many coho salmon have entered Idaho over the years, I want to share this graph with you. It shows a number of adult coho salmon that have passed over Lower Granite Dam since 1995. Coho salmon fisheries in the Clearwater River have become possible thanks to the Nez Perce tribe's hatchery program. Their efforts have brought us from where no coho salmon were counted passing Lower Granite Dam in the 1990s to where now counts over 7,000 fish are now common. With these increased returns, we were able to provide the first coho salmon fisheries in recent memory in 2014. And since 2017, we have been able to provide fishing opportunities in 3 of the last 4 years. In all these years, we have provided coho salmon fisheries. We set the daily limit at 2 fish. This limit has been effective in providing reasonable harvest opportunity for anglers while not causing us to exceed our harvest share. However, in some years, the number of jack coho salmon, which spend 1 year in the ocean, can be quite abundant. The Nez Perce tribe does not use these fish for spawning purposes, and as such, it would make sense to have different limits for jacks than adults. Now that is all the background information we have for you on coho salmon fisheries in the Clearwater Basin. We have developed 3 questions on this coho salmon fishery that we hope you will take the time to answer to help ensure we develop proposals that capture what is important to anglers. You can find the questionnaire specific to coho salmon on the Clearwater Region webpage. Another topic I want to bring up that you may want to comment on is the electric motors only restriction we have in some of our Lowland lakes. These restrictions were developed to help prevent boats or personal watercrafts like jet skis from roaring around these small lakes where they could become a nuisance and potentially a danger to anglers. In the Clearwater region, we have 5 Lowland lakes with electric motor only restrictions. The reason I'm bringing this topic up is because some anglers have been asking for us to remove the electric motor restrictions and replace it with a no wake and no personal watercraft restriction. In their view, this would allow anglers who only have gas engines on their boats to fish these lakes and still be able to maintain the peace and serenity people desire while fishing these lakes. In fact, there are 3 Lowland lakes in the Clearwater region where we do exactly that. The 3 lakes are Deer Creek Reservoir, Deo Reservoir, and Elk Creek Reservoir. What these lakes have in common is they are owned or managed by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, which gives us the authority to post specific restrictions that people must follow when using these properties, such as the restrictions shown on this slide here. There are 8 different lowland lakes in the Clearwater region that are either owned or managed by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. The locations of those lakes are shown on this map. Those lakes portrayed with red circles have electric-only motor restrictions. Those lakes portrayed with a purple circle allow the use of gas motors, but have a no wake and no personal watercraft restriction. And the lake portrayed with a gray circle has no restrictions pertaining to motors. What we want to know from others is, what are your thoughts regarding motor restrictions on these lakes? And would you like to see something different in the future? If you have comments on this topic, please enter them in the comment box on this Clearwater Region webpage. Finally, I want to mention to all of you that there are a lot of different fisheries across the Clearwater region that people enjoy to fish. We have world-class bass fisheries, hundreds of miles of trout streams, over 100 high mountain lakes, 11 lowland lakes that provide popular family and harvest-oriented fisheries. We have harvest-oriented kokanee fisheries, and you can even seek out the largest freshwater fish in North America, the white sturgeon, in some of our rivers. Regardless of which fishery it is, we want to know what is on your mind. Please let us know if there are changes in our seasons or limits that you would like to see. Once again, you can submit your comments in the Clearwater Region's public input page. Your input is valuable to us to ensure we develop proposals that capture what is important to anglers. That is all we have to share with you today, and so at this point we'd like to take the time to answer any questions that you may have on any of our fisheries. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Great presentation. So with that, as Joe mentioned, we're just going to go ahead and move forward with some of the questions that we have coming in, and we'll just get started with that. So our first question will go to Sean Wilson. And Sean, the question is, are current bass regulations restrictive enough to protect the trophy smallmouth bass fishery that occurs in Dvorak Reservoir?
Yeah, so the smallmouth fishing in Dvorak is pretty popular, particularly because it's an opportunity to catch some large fish. You know, we've had state records come out of there, including a current catch and release record. And because of that, folks that like to catch these large smallmouth are sometimes concerned about, you know, are the regulations we have in place going to protect that or not? And, you know, currently we want to do a few things. We want to keep fishing rules simple. We want to provide some harvest opportunity, but we also want to protect these trophy fisheries that make places like Dvorak so popular. So a few of the things that we can look at to see if the current rules are working to do that or not is we can look at what anglers are harvesting. So on Dvorak, you might see 75–80% of anglers would catch bass on a given day, but only 20% would harvest. Another thing we can do is we can use what we call our Tag Your It program, where we stick the little orange tags in the fish, and then when anglers catch them, they can pull those tags off and report whether they harvested a fish or released it. And we see that harvest rates for bass on Dvorak have been continuing to decline since 2007. And recently they've been down around 11%, which is about as low as anywhere we'd see in the state. We also see that catch or harvest rates for the largest bass tend to be among the lowest harvest rates. And that's because while a novice angler can go out and catch a lot of small fish, it takes an experienced angler to catch those big fish consistently. And those experienced anglers tend to be catch and release oriented because they want to protect the resource. So when we kind of look at all of that together, what we see is that we can keep the rules simple. We can still allow some harvest opportunity, but still protect this trophy component that we have up there. But this is something we want to, keep our finger on the pulse of this and make sure that, things aren't changing. So we're sending creel clerks out there to talk to anglers again and see what they're catching. And we have plans to tag a lot more fish again this year to make sure those harvest rates stay low. And if we see some trends going the wrong way, then we can do something about it.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And the next question will be for Marika. So Marika, can low returns of wild steelhead restrict our ability to have sport fishing opportunities for hatchery steelhead?
Thanks, Jen. That's a pretty complicated question. When we have low returns of wild steelhead, usually that means our hatchery steelhead returns are going to be low as well. And because of that, there are precautions that we have with regards to the hatchery fish that could restrict fisheries, because we need broodstock fish to make it back to the hatchery for future generations. So a lot of times when we have low returns in general, many people have fished the Clearwater, know that we've had size restrictions and reduced bag limits on steelhead because of that. But with regard to the other side of the coin is that there is a 10% total mortality that we have on wild steelhead, and that's take for both the sport fishery and the tribal fishery. So we do monitor our catch and release mortality and then the tribal harvest on wild steelhead through the season, and try to keep below that 10%. And based on a monitoring that we've done in the past, that mortality rate is usually fairly low. We often don't see it over 5%. So that's usually not the main concern with regards to restrictions on our fishery. One last thing to note is that we do monitor the critical levels that are needed of wild steelhead. So as long as we stay above that critical level for wild steelhead returns, those restrictions are probably not going to apply. So it's just a matter of monitoring, making sure the returns are above that. So thank you for the question.
Thanks, Marika. So the next question will go to Dawn. And Dawn, someone's asking here, why can't we harvest coho in the Snake River?
Well, unlike the coho fisheries that we've recently had in the Clearwater Basin, the coho releases that are going through the Snake River are returning to the Grand Ronde River through releases with the Nez Perce Tribe and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And those coho returns are new enough now that we just don't have a really good idea of the actual brood needs, where we're going to collect the brood, and if there's available harvest after brood is met. So still a little bit too early, but as soon as we get it figured out, we're definitely working towards opening a coho fishery if harvestable levels above brood needs are available. Thanks.
Thank you, Dawn. And the next question will go to Mike. So Mike, what is Fish and Game doing to restore steelhead habitat?
Thanks, Jen. I should start off by saying that our focus for the steelhead habitat is actually on the juvenile steelhead. And our work is focused in the Potlatch River Basin, as that supports the largest spawning area of wild steelhead in the lower Clearwater River. And as such, it's key to our recovery efforts. So within the Potlatch, there are two main spawning aggregations that we prioritize restoration work in. That is the East Fork Potlatch River in the upper watershed and the Big Barrett Creek in the lower. Each of these subbasins has unique characteristics limiting steelhead production, and we tailor our approach to address limiting factors specific to each subbasin. So in the past, we've focused on improving in-stream fish passage to suitable habitat through things like modification of culverts. We've also focused on improving in-stream flows through things such as meadow restoration and improving floodplain connectivity and function, as well as improving in-stream habitat complexity through adding large wood jams, as well as individual large trees to the stream that provide the habitat that's currently lacking. So we're always on the lookout for landowners that are interested in habitat restoration on their property. And please contact the regional office or or myself directly if you're interested in doing restoration work on your property.
Cool, thanks, Mike. And if folks haven't seen the work that's being done with some of these habitat projects, I encourage you to go take a look at it. We'll be continuing to put out some news releases and stories and blogs as we go along to show just the complexity of what Mike and his project is working on. So this next question will go to Robert. And Robert, what types of trophy largemouth bass opportunities do we provide in lakes in the Clearwater region?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So in the past, we've had a lot of input from bass anglers about providing some more trophy style opportunities for largemouth. So in 2016, we implemented a 2-fish limit with none under 16 inches for largemouth bass on Spring Valley, Man Lake, and Deo reservoirs. So this was kind of a combination of trying to provide more of a harvest opportunity and also to protect some of the populations from overharvest, especially in our newer Deo reservoir. But we were having some overharvest issues there where people were wanting to keep some fish, and with that new reservoir, we were just having trouble keeping that population going. So our surveys in the last few years are showing some really good improvements in bass size and numbers in all 3 of these reservoirs, especially in that kind of 12 to 16 inch range, which suggests that the restrictive regulations are doing their job. And this should lead us to seeing more larger bass here in the next few years. And we should start seeing more of those fish get above 16 inches, which would provide some harvest opportunity for those that are interested in keeping a fish or two. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, that's a neat opportunity with those bigger fish. So this next one will go to Joe. So Joe, how about a very limited, special, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for catch and take sturgeon for a non-native or two?
Well, Jen, I'm glad somebody asked me a question about sturgeon because they're one of my favorite fish. So in the Clearwater region, sturgeon fisheries occur in the Snake River from Lewiston up to Hells Canyon Dam, as well as in the Salmon River. Although most of the effort and most of the fish occur in the Snake River. One of the reasons that we only provide catch and release fishing opportunities in these rivers is these fish take a long time before they reach maturity. In fact, recent research shows that females will first start spawning when they're about 50 years old. And so you can imagine that even if you harvest just a few of them, you can start having impacts over time. And that is why we've stuck to catch and release fishing opportunities here in the Clearwater region. Now, that being said, we have now developed a sturgeon hatchery in coordination with Idaho Power, where they now collect sturgeon eggs in the bliss reach of the Snake River, and then they can raise those eggs up. And we're starting to look at planting these sturgeon in other areas. And some of our thoughts are to provide some limited fishing opportunities in these areas in the future. So we're not providing those opportunities now, but stay tuned, because sometime in the not too distant future, you may be able to have those types of opportunities. So thanks, Jen. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. So we'll just switch over to Marika. And Marika, with the addition of Coho, fall Chinook, summer run Chinook in our rivers, is there a concern about the carrying capacity of the river to support all of these juveniles competing for food until they're ready to head out to the Pacific?
Thanks, Jen. That's a great question. With regards to the hatchery fish that are released, there is a lot of strategy with regards to where they're released, so that there's not that as much competition with wild fish that are rearing in these streams. So in the hatchery, these fish are actually reared up to a pretty large size, with the thought that when they do release these fish, it usually occurs in the springtime. And when they're released, they actually don't spend a lot of time in these main stem rivers. They're released during the springtime, so they're pretty much going out with the flow. Most of these are smolts, so again, they spend very little time in the river, and most of the releases are on the main stem rivers. And a lot of the research that we've done with regards to monitoring juvenile salmon and steelhead show that a lot of these fish are rearing in tributary systems where hatchery fish aren't typically released. And even fish that spend a good amount of time in the main stem rivers, these are steelhead and some Chinook that are over winter, they're rearing throughout the winter in the main stem system. So they're still not really interacting with these hatchery releases. So there is a lot of strategy to this, these hatchery releases to minimize competition with these wild fish. Thanks, Jen.
Great, thank you. So here's one for Dawn. Dawn, someone's saying here that they fish from the bank and they want to catch steelhead near the confluence. And sometimes here the fishing is good at the Orofino Dam and drive up there. Do others catch fish from the bank? Are the boats that fish near me taking the fish, or do I need a boat to catch these fish a little better?
Okay, that's a long one. It's a good one. So if you're talking about the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers, yes, you can catch fish from the bank there. A lot of people do. Typically September, October, August, September, October, or you get into pretty decent fish in there. You do have an advantage from fishing from a boat, especially early in the season, August, September, as Snake River and Salmon River fish pull into the cold water of the Clearwater coming out of the Clearwater. So by fishing in the confluence in a boat, you do have opportunity to more fish than just fishing just off the bank in the Clearwater River near the confluence. As far as, let's see, the Orofino, the Dorshak Dam near Orofino. Again, those are primarily Clearwater fish, so they're going to be October, they're going to be showing up. So early season, probably not a good idea. The steelhead fishery doesn't open there until September 1. But wait until October. It's kind of the early portion of the harvest season up there, where you can get into some Clearwater fish in the North Fork, which is at the right below Dorshak Dam. What was the third part of the question? Boats do take fish when they're fishing the confluence area during the steelhead fishery. It's a really popular fishery. Probably the most congregation of anglers that you see is at the confluence in the early portion of the season. Do you need a boat to catch more fish? It gives you more opportunity, but there's plenty of bank anglers that also catch a lot of fish. So I guess it's just timing dependent. This is a long question, so definitely you're more than welcome. We're here to answer all the questions. So just give us a call at the regional office and I can go into more detail about specific timing and what to use and where to use it.
Great, thanks, Don. We'll go ahead and move over to Robert. So Robert, is there any thought of putting more of an emphasis on warm water species, such as crappie and perch in our lowland lakes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. So I'm going to kind of answer this one in two parts. First, I think that we've been doing a lot better job the last few years on improving the warm water fishing opportunities throughout our Lowland Lake program. As I mentioned on the last question I answered, those restrictive regulations on bass are really improving those populations and creating some larger bass opportunities. And that's also going to potentially help some of our bluegill fisheries by improving that predator-prey interaction. Plus, reservoirs like Man Lake, Spring Valley, and Deo Reservoir are just kind of in general more warm water focused. As for perch and crappie specifically, I wish there was more that we could do to provide some great crappie and perch fishing. As a Southern boy, I really miss my crappie fishing opportunities. However, these two species are pretty difficult to manage in our small reservoirs. They tend to be what we call boom or bust, meaning that they often have a great year of spawning, followed by several really poor years of spawning. And this can lead to really big variations in like sizes and numbers of fish in the reservoir. And we often get like overpopulations of smaller fish at times, especially with the perch. In the end, just because with the small reservoirs, there isn't a lot we can do to really focus on those species. Wish we could, but yeah, every now and then we get some really great crappie fishing in Man Lake. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Usually about every 4 or 5 years, we'll see a lot of about 12-inch fish out there. So that's probably our most consistent crappie fishery as far as this region goes.
Great. And Robert, let's go ahead and stick with you for this next one. So someone's wondering here, they're just wondering if the kokanee and Soldiers Meadow have been able to provide a sustainable fishery.
Yeah, so kokanee are still there. They seem to be doing pretty well. We've been stocking them for, oh gosh, what, about 6 years now. We've seen kokanee up to 14 inches, even though most of the larger ones are about 10 to 12 inches. So, you know, not world-class kokanee like some of the major lakes in the state, but can still be some pretty good fishing. We do still stock some rainbow trout in there as well, so may catch a few of those. From talking with anglers and some creel surveys and just some people I know that have been up there, it actually seems like the ice fishery in the winter can be pretty good, though that seems to be more of a secret fishery because not very many people have been taking advantage of that. So if anyone does get out there on Soldiers, especially on the ice fishery, feel free to give me a call or drop me an email or something. Let me know how you did. I'd love to get a little more input on that. But yeah, the fish are out there. They're surviving and growing. And yeah, it can be a pretty good fishery.
Great. Thanks a lot, Robert. And let's go ahead and Joe, we have a question for you. So someone's asking here, can I catch a sturgeon from the bank?
All right, another sturgeon question. So can you catch a sturgeon from the bank? Certainly you can, but it is more difficult, and it's more difficult just because, you know, sturgeon can get big. It's not unusual to catch fish over 7 or 8 feet. And if you're on a shoreline and you can't follow those fish downriver, it becomes difficult to land them. Let me tell you a little story. A friend of mine came up fishing last year and wanted to fish from our shore, and I told him a good spot, and he went out there and fished that night, and he told me he ended up hooking 13 sturgeon, and he only landed 2 of them, and that's because he could not follow them far enough downstream. So however, if you do want to fish for sturgeon from the shore, a couple things I would look for. And I'm going to talk about the Snake River here in this case, because that's where most of the sturgeon are in our region. I would find a place where there's a nice back eddy pool area. And you want a place that you can at least go downstream with the fish far enough to land it. We really don't condone hooking and breaking off fish and leaving a lot of line on them, because it can cause a lot of problems. If you're looking for an area, try the Snake River Road. It's actually on the Washington side. There's a lot of different back eddies there. Almost every back eddy will have a sturgeon in it. So just look for those spots, cast out, and give it some time, and you'll probably hook some. So, but if you can muster up a boat, certainly your opportunities to land these fish only get better. Thanks, Jen.
Great, thank you. So let's move over to Mike. And Mike, you talked a little bit about this before, but just give us a little more information on what do I need to do if I'm interested in doing a steelhead habitat project on my property?
Sure thing, Jen. So yeah, like I mentioned before, the very first thing would be to contact me directly here at the Clearwater Regional Office. And at that point, I can visit with you and schedule a time to come look at your property and begin generating some ideas. We like to work collaboratively with landowners and make them a big part of the process, address any concerns, and make sure their needs are being met throughout the entire process of coming up with an idea and a project design. So after that, we would go through various various iterations of design. And basically, in order to maximize our limited funds and the effectiveness of restoration actions, any project that we are considering doing gets vetted by our department as well as our habitat restoration partners in the region. So in some cases, a proposed project might not get funded, but we can still offer advice and or help with permitting with landowners that are still interested in implementing a project to benefit steelhead on their property.
Thanks, Mike. And let's go ahead and go to Sean. So Sean, here's another kokanee question. In some years, a lot of kokanee get flushed out of door shack. If we see dying kokanee floating down the North Fork of the Clearwater River, can we collect them and take them home? It seems like a waste just to leave them out there.
Yeah, so when we get a lot of fish that get flushed out of the dam, we call that entrainment. And we probably always have a little bit of entrainment going on, but where we see a lot of entrainment tends to be years where there's a high snowpack. And so the dam operators are flushing a lot of water out of the dam in the springtime and bringing the pool elevation in the reservoir down. And that'll lead to a lot of fish being flushed out, and you'll see them floating down the river. In the past, when we've had this happen, we'll have an emergency fish salvage open up, and that generally takes a day or two to get through. We think we have a pretty good idea when conditions might be right for entrainment, so we'll try to keep an eye on it, and so we can open that up, but we can't get out there all the time to check on it. And, sometimes it might catch us by surprise. So if you see a lot of fish floating down the river and you see some opportunity, give us a call, call us here at the main office. If a salvage fishery is opened up, we'd post that on the web page and post it out on the river. And Joe would likely get some emails out to folks to let them know that opportunity is there. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Sean. And it looks like, I think we have most of the questions that we have had tonight coming in. I'm just taking a look here to make sure we answered them all. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks again for your participation, your comments, and your feedback. Remember, you still have time to submit your questions from now and through April 11th. And if you have any questions specific to the Clearwater region, you can contact Joe DuPont at 208-799-5010, or you can email Joe at this email listed on the screen, joe.dupont@idfg.idaho.gov. And again, we're going to compile all this information, and it'll be presented to the commission at their May meeting. So thanks again for joining us and for your participation. We really do take all your feedback and we consider it when we put our proposals together. So again, just don't hesitate to reach out if you would like some more information or have more questions. Thanks again, and have a great night.